Recording in progress.
Down hearing aid case, does anybody recognize? Looks like it's a charger as well. Anybody drop a hearing aid case?
Is it Paul, my guy? Cindy? Paul?
Okay, it was kind of back in that area. Does this look like Eddie's? Okay, I'll check with her. That looks like he's got it.
Okay. Well,
since I'm doing this next week, I've never asked this question. What time do you see yourself starting and what time do you end?
ask the.
Okay.
Do you want to start at quarter till?
Huh?
Do you want to start at a quarter till?
Yeah, if it's, yeah.
Did
this
you
one-
ring?
I didn't, I will go do it.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me?
Oh, a little louder.
Little louder?
Please.
How about now?
No.
Is the mic on?
It doesn't sound like the mic.
Mike's not on. Is it on?
Yeah.
It's not on.
That's better now, say it.
I just don't want to overpower it.
That's much better.
Okay.
There we go.
We're going to begin. We're going to talk about the religious right and how it is both similar and dissimilar to the religious left. Many of us would place ourselves on the religious left, and we'll see as we go along what we can think about that. Okay, so I have to get the cursor over. There we go. There. Oh well. So, our country is more divided than it's been in a very long time. There are splits and fractures geographically. Just wave your hand, it'll go away. There's fractures geographically, economically, socially, politically, and religiously. So today's forum looks specifically at the divides between the religious right and the religious left. We'll begin by defining what we mean by the religious right and placing it in a historical context. There are some caveats. We are of necessity painting with a broad brush. We only have, well, between the two of us, we have an hour, but I only have about 30 minutes. So there's a limit to how far and how deep we can go. Also, second caveat is because I spent most of my adult life on the religious right. And much of that time I regret. But I can't go back and undo it. So there it is. So some of what you'll hear is the weight of my own personal experience and personal perspectives from being in a fundamentalist conservative church on the far right. We'll explain as best we can why they are the way they are. And we'll talk about what it means for someone to leave the right. And then we'll talk about what it means to talk to someone on the right and the possibility of them leaving the right. Okay, so first, wrong way. Defining evangelicalism. Fred Clark has said that the definition of an evangelical is a Protestant Christian who is preoccupied with defining evangelical. You have to understand that the word was first used religiously in the Reformation by your friend and mine, Martin Luther. And it was rooted in the Reformation's emphasis on a reliance on the gospel and not church tradition. And from the Reformation to about midway through the 19th century, the word evangelical was applied to any non-Catholic, non-Mormon, non-Unitarian, non-Universalist religion. So everybody, Presbyterians, Episcopalians, Baptists, Methodists, Wesleyans, Nazarene, they were all evangelical, and they were all happy with the term. It gained a distinct form through the 18th century revivals like the Great Awakening, which emphasized personal conversion, the Bible's authority, and emotional experience, merging Pietism and Puritanism and Calvinism. The Second Great Awakening in the U.S. in the early 19th century spurred mass evangelization. Think Charles Finney and Dwight L. Moody. You familiar with those names? Okay. And then later movements of the 19th century, like the Holiness and Methodist and Wesleyan strains and Pentecostal traditions, focused on the Holy Spirit, leading to a diverse global movement emphasizing spiritual rebirth and missions. Now, it was post-Civil War, especially the 1880s into the 1900s and up to World War II, that evangelicalism became aligned with the fundamentalist movement and fully diverged from and defined itself in opposition to mainline Protestants. When I was on their side, I thought you were all whacked out. We doubted whether you and the Catholics were actually really Christians.
Stronger than doubt.
It was stronger than doubt. There were some people believed you were not, and that we were the only ones with the truth. Now, while many evangelicals will say, well, there's a through line through all of these centuries with regard to evangelicalism, the actual truth is there is not a through line. There's no through line from the Reformation to the present because after World War II and especially after the 1960s, the evangelical movement sought to define itself more distinctly from the leftward drift of culture and the civil rights movement of the 60s. And it was the movement by Jerry Falwell who created the moral majority, along with Paul Weyrich, who was a political operative. I'm not even sure if he was a Christian. He was a political operative who got with Jerry Falwell and said, we can make this work for us. Now, Matthew Avery Sutton, who is a department head at Washington State University in the history department and a professor of cultural history, U.S. history, and religious history, wrote a landmark article in 2024 called Redefining the History and Historiography of American Evangelicalism in the Era of the Religious Right. And he was one of the first ones to come out and say that evangelicalism is a political movement. It's a religio-political coalition, a white, patriarchal, nationalistic, religious movement made up of Christians who seek power to transform American culture through conservative-leaning politics and free market economics. So when I'm talking today about the religious right and about evangelicalism, that's the definition I'm using from one of my fellow professors at Washington State University. Now, I'm slicing and dicing this in the way that I best understand how to do it. And that is through the lens of stages of faith development. Now, in 1980, James Fowler, who was a professor at Emory University, wrote a book called The Stages of Faith, which was really pretty academic. But he identified 6 stages of faith that everyone goes through, right, center, left. Everyone goes through those stages. Then, a few years later, Gwellich and Hagberg, Janet Hagberg was a psychologist and Robert Gwellich was a minister, wrote a book called The Critical Journey, and I recommend it to you all, The Critical Journey. And they're less focused on the sociological, intellectual, and academic descriptions of these stages and more focused on personal, individual, spiritual journey. And they define spirituality basically as the way in which we live out our response to God. So they identify these 6 stages. Stage 1, the recognition of God. Stage 2, the life of discipleship. Stage 3, the productive life. Stage 4, the inward journey. Stage 5, the outward journey. And stage 6, the life of love. Now, they say that these stages are pretty fluid, and you can actually go back and forth between them. You can start in 1, go to 2, hit 3, and then go back to 2, or back to 1. You can't jump from 3 to 6. You have to go through all the stages, but they're very fluid. Secondly, it is possible to get stuck in a stage. When you're stuck in that stage, you don't know you're stuck. But there's some very negative and unhealthy things that happen when you're stuck in a development stage. None of these stages are right or wrong. None is better than the others, unless you are stuck in an unhealthy way. So I'm just going to run through these, and I want you not to listen for the religious right. I want you to listen for yourself. See if you can identify for yourself what stage of faith development you are in. Okay, number 1 is becoming aware that there is a God and that God is there. It includes a sense of awe as well as a sense of need. It can lead to a greater sense of meaning in life as well as a joyful sense of innocence. Stage 1 is sometimes expressed in superstition, viewing God as a magician in the sky. I went to the supermarket. I couldn't find a parking place. I prayed, Jesus, give me a parking space. And then one opened. Thank you, Jesus. You laugh, but we lived that. This superstitious approach to God can also be seen in the ways that certain phrases can be perceived as magic words. Have you asked Jesus into your heart? Are you saved? The first forum I presented here, I talked about being saved. And y'all looked at me like, what? And somebody asked, I don't remember who it was, and I'm not dissing on you at all. Somebody asked, what do you mean by saved? And I'm like, what the hell do you mean by saved? Don't you guys talk about saved? Paula was the only one who knew what I meant by that. It's an evangelical thing. You got to have a personal conversion. I don't believe that anymore. I think it's still helpful, but I don't believe that as a requirement anymore. When you are stuck in stage 1, you can have feelings of worthlessness, guilt, shame, and a fear of rejection because you're kind of entering into this new thing and you're afraid they're going to kick you out. The second stage is best characterized as a time of learning and belonging. We attach ourselves to a founder like Martin Luther or John Calvin or Mary Baker Eddy, or a leader or a group that we trust, respect, and follow. Our answers are found in a leader, in a cause, and in a belief system, and we are not confident in ourselves to know what to believe or to learn about God and know God better, so we're dependent on someone more advanced than us. This stage is characterized by a sense of rightness and certainty, and I'm going to come back to that word certainty over and over and over again. The stage is characterized by a sense of rightness and certainty because we are less beset by doubts and fears and questions. It is characterized by that certainty, security, and comfort because we finally found workable solutions, and even if we have questions, someone else is responsible to lead us. Becoming stuck at this stage involves becoming rigid in our rightness or our righteousness, and in developing a very strong us versus them mentality. Being stuck here can lead to a very closed, insular, esoteric, paranoid mindset, being overly protective of the group, and anyone in our group is good, and anyone outside our group is bad. So all y'all Lutherans are good, and then Presbyterians, Stage 3, the productive life. Stage 3 is characterized as the doing stage. As we've progressed through stage 2, we've learned and we're able to become one who gives back, helps others, and leads those who are also entering stage 2. It's when we consciously find ourselves working for God. How many of you have ever been on a church committee? How many of you ever been on council? How many of you ever sponsored someone as a new member? How many of you sponsored a catechumen? Someone in catechism. Okay. If you raised your hand, you're in stage 3, or you've experienced stage 3. It's an active, busy, productive, and rewarding time of life. It can feel exciting and awesome and fruitful, and there's a strong sense of community and belonging because we're engaged responsibly in sustaining the community of faith to which we belong. Being caged or stuck at this stage can include feeling weary and burned out. How many of you are burned out on committees? Go ahead, admit it. Okay. Burned out from striving to be productive. The level of engagement that most people have in stage 3 can be sustained for a few years, perhaps a few decades, but it will wear you down. When stuck, life can feel like a performance or a facade, and we're often angry with God or church leadership, and we're fearful about being found out that we really don't want to be on that committee anymore. So you become kind of passive-aggressive. And other aspects of being stuck in stage 3 include being overly zealous. And this isn't the sense of, I'm so happy I have to tell you what I found in Jesus. This is y'all need to get together and join me in this. It's kind of a harsh overzealousness. We're trying to justify our involvement by making other people join us in our misery. Okay. Stage 4 is the inward journey. And it's called the inward journey because it's inward. Faith at this stage is rediscovering God. It almost always comes as an unsettling experience, yet results in healing for those who continue through it. Stage 4 is often precipitated by gnawing, unanswered, unmanageable questions that can no longer be ignored or repressed. For me, there were several things that kind of flowed together, threads that wove together for me in stage 4. One was, why do we as a church on the religious right view homosexuality as worse than some other sin? My pastor was overweight, as were most of his family. Why isn't gluttony on the list of things we're upset about? Why is only homosexuality the one we're upset about? Those gnawing questions, unanswered and unmanageable questions, can no longer be ignored. Sometimes the failure of a leader can be the precipitating factor. For the first time, our faith or belief system or formulas don't seem to work. The church said, if you do A, B, C, and D, E will happen. Your kids will turn out right. Your kids will love you. You'll prosper in your job. So you do A, B, C, and D, and E did not follow. And that's terribly upsetting, because you thought you were doing the right thing. At this stage, instead of operating out of the certainty and knowledge and the answers of stage 3, at this stage we shift from knowing to seeking. Answers are replaced by questions as we look for personal direction or for something more personal fulfilling. Our church had a motto in the 90s, which was, we have answers for life. And as the 90s progressed, I'm like, I have questions of life. I have no answers. I have questions. But they keep preaching from the pulpit, we have answers for life. And I'm like, I don't. I wish I did. Clearly, I was entering stage 4. Those in stage 4 discover that God is not who or what they thought they were. We find it easy to blame the church or our leaders for our discomfort and uncertainty. Being stuck in this stage can involve a continuous questioning with no answers. Often it involves more the finding of ourselves than the finding of faith, and can result in locking up or immobilization. Now, stage 4 has something called the wall. At some point in stage 4, each person experiences an event called the wall. Sometimes it's a wall event that actually leads us into stage 4. The precipitating event is different for each person because in every case it's a personal invitation from God to come further and deeper in relationship. But at some point, all will say, things just aren't working anymore. There has got to be more. The wall event can be a crisis of faith, a death, loss of a marriage, a job loss, a moral failure, spiritual boredom, or a deep longing, or some combination of those events, and it's different for everyone. You might conceptualize the wall as you've been operating and you're holding a beach ball under the water. And suddenly life gets kind of busy and then you're only holding the ball with one hand. What does that ball want to do? Comes to the surface. Whatever that thing was comes to the surface, and you have to address it. Fundamentally, it has to do with slowly breaking through the barriers we have built between our will and a newer awareness of God in our lives. At the wall, something is always given up or surrendered. What it is differs with each person, but is usually something central to one's identity. Giving it up doesn't mean losing, but rather a release and a detachment in whatever that form takes. Now, mentally, put a finger here, because we're going to come back to that. So you're going through 3 into 4, and somewhere between 4 and 5, you will hit a wall. Okay. Stage 5, after the turmoil of the wall, and if we come through it and we don't turn back, stage 5 represents a surrender to God's will to direct our lives, but with our eyes wide open and our awareness tuned in. We are aware but unafraid of the consequences. Our primary motivation in life becomes the desire to love honestly and live according to God's purposes. Consequently, for some, life patterns, work habits, friends, ways of being in the world will slowly change. In stage 2, we surrender to that life of which we are sure. And in stage 5, we surrender to that life purpose which we have yet to know or understand. There comes a profound comfort with uncertainty, mystery, and paradox that's characterized by an inner calm and peace. If mystery still bothers you, don't worry about it. You're not in stage 5. If you've embraced mystery, you're probably in stage 5. The interesting thing about this is that people in stage 5 tend to be older, wiser, seasoned by life, open to possibilities, and hopeful. And interestingly enough, being stuck isn't usually a concern at this stage. Stage 6, the life of love. In stage 6, we reflect the love of God to the world more clearly and consistently than we ever thought possible. In this stage, we both lose ourselves in the equation and at the same time find ourselves like we never have before. Stage 6 is characterized by more Christ-like living in obedience to God. There's wisdom gained from a life's struggles and compassionate living for others. Few people get this far. The therapist that I was working with that explained all of this to me said that in her whole experience as a therapist, as a Christian therapist, she'd met one person in stage 6. And then they died. So, it's still a goal. That's still our target. But just recognize most of us aren't going to get there. Okay. Now, the operative question in any teaching, those of you who are teachers know this, the operative question is, so what? Everybody say, so what? Okay. This is the so what. Most evangelicals on the religious right exist in either stage 2 or stage 3, and they are stuck there. For those on the right who may even make it to stage 4 and then hit the wall, one author suggested that 85% of evangelicals that hit the wall never go through it to stage 5. They loop back to 2 or 3. They start over. When people are stuck at a particular place in their journey, they do so because it's more comfortable to sit than to move on. It may be too frightening to move. And after a while, sitting still moves from comfortable to stuckness. And when stuck long enough, we become trapped. And frequently, this happens unconsciously. Now, what did we say about what stuckness is in stage 2 and 3? You become rigid in their rightness and righteousness. They become close-minded. They are moralistic, rigidly binary notions of what is right and wrong, and pride that they are right and everyone else must be wrong. Definitely an us versus them mentality, with everyone outside the group viewed as bad, and that includes any others who claim to be Christians, like y'all mainliners. But they do not believe as we do. We were taught, I should say, that Catholic and mainline Protestants, we're not real Christians. And the first time I attended a course, a teaching, Christian teaching outside of our church, the first time I attended a teaching with a course of people outside our church, I found that there were a lot of lovely, sweet Christians who loved Jesus and had no desire to be part of our church. I hate to say that. I admit this. It was eye-opening to me. We become insular and isolationist, paranoid, and fearing contamination by anyone not in our group. We were told, don't be careful making friends outside the church because you could be contaminated by them. Be careful who your kids' friends are because your kids can be contaminated by them. It always struck me that Jesus would lay hands on It struck me that Jesus would lay hands on the leper and not worry about contamination. Sometimes when they're stuck, they're angry with God, but that is often expressed as anger at everybody else, because you can't be angry at God. And they become passive-aggressive. They are often self-centered, overzealous, works-oriented, and demanding that others believe as they do. And here's the tragic thing, they do not think they are stuck. So, looking at the wall. Here's what happens when you hit the wall. Stage 4 is right there in that shifting zone. Okay, right there. So 4 things can happen when you hit the wall. One is you loop back to stage 2 or 3 within the same group, and they just start over and avoid Wally things in the future. Some hit the wall, unravel, deconstruct, but they don't abandon God and faith. They loop back to stage 2 and 3 in a different group. So a Baptist might become a Catholic, or a charismatic might become a liturgical Episcopalian, or a Christian might become a Buddhist. Or, in my case, a fundamentalist conservative evangelical wingnut might become a far left progressive, liberal, and Lutheranish. I'm still learning about you Lutherans. I don't know if I'm in 2 or 3. I don't know. There's a lot to learn from you guys who have been cradle Lutherans. You may have things to learn from me, too. Some people deconstruct, they unravel, they deconstruct, and they sever. They walk away from God. Some of my dearest friends who were in the church that shall not be named back in the day, deconstructed, hit the wall, deconstructed, severed, and they are adamant atheists at this point. A man who led worship, who taught classes, who preached, is an adamant atheist. And he's still one of my best friends. And he is kinder and gentler than many Christians I know. Okay, lastly, a person at this stage might actually go through the wall to stage 5. How cool is that? Now, the question is, why do so many on the religious right stay on the religious right? Number 1, it's about affiliation. They belong to a group. But more than that, affiliation means you adopt the group's sense of purpose and meaning. Everyone wants to be part of something bigger than themselves because doing so means gives meaning to one's existence. Affiliation is so strong on the religious right. I went to all the websites of churches in Gig Harbor. And one of the very first ones on the front page of their website was, "You belong here." Big letters. Because they're offering affiliation. I went to a conference at another evangelical church once, and their logo was "Doing Life Together." It was the weirdest thing to be standing at a urinal and there's a sign that says "Doing Life Together." Next, and this is huge, certainty. Certainty is a drug that every human is addicted to. We are evolved to seek control, to not trust in the uncertain and the unknown, and the religious right thrives in certainty. Some of what provides that certainty, at least theologically, are the ideas of divine inspiration, and especially verbal plenary inspiration, infallibility and inerrancy of the Bible, that the Bible is the explicit word of God that is infallible and inerrant, and every word of it is true and can be trusted as factual. The Bible, and usually a very literal interpretation thereof, becomes a handbook or a guidebook for every arena of life, including education, government, economics, society, entertainment, medicine, ethics, gender, relationships, sexuality. Name a topic. Even if the Bible doesn't address it, it's still the guidebook for that topic. Lastly, conformity. Conformity stems from the natural human desire to fit in and be accepted by others. Sociologists have found that the desire to fit in is so strong that people are willing to conform to a majority opinion even if they know it's wrong and it differs from what they believe. This conformity can extend from fashion and styles of clothing to thought patterns, doctrinal stances, as well as our willingness to comply with requests for service or help. Some churches take advantage of that. They'll ask you over and over again to do things, and you just get sucked in, overburdened. Ask Deb sometime about the dresses that the girls in our church wore in the 70s. I'm not going to go there. Okay. Some churches on the right will exploit this desire to conform and be accepted and will get their members to do all kinds of things that those otherwise reasonable people would be loath to do. Our church taught that the appropriate level of tithing was 23 1/3%. And we strove with all our heart to be a good member and tithe at 23 1/3%. But when your kids are in the church daycare or the church school that you're paying for, and you tithe 23 1/3%, try to live on whatever is left over. It's hard. This kind of conformity is how 81% of evangelicals could vote for a convicted rapist and serial adulterer. They voted against their own moral and ethical codes in order to remain in conformity with their faith community, even though their vote was secret. So, affiliation, certainty, and conformity. That's what the right offers. How do they do it? They have a tendency to focus on right beliefs over inner transformation, a tendency to prefer certainty over mystery, and again, that's huge, a tendency to view conversion as a transaction, as something that is earned, and as an event, rather than freely given and as a process. It was mind-boggling to me when I heard a Christian pastor preach that our spiritual life was a journey and not a series of events. I can't describe it. It was just mind-blowing to me. There's a tendency to use the Bible as a weapon instead of as a door or a window into a different realm or into a different kingdom. There's a tendency to use the fear of exclusion from heaven and inclusion as hell as motivation rather than love as motivation. A tendency toward us versus them thinking, and a tendency to use Jesus to enforce boundaries rather than building a larger table. Now, how does this all work? The core dynamics of the religious right is that for most of what they're doing, their faith is framed as defending a fixed set of doctrines. These fixed doctrines include things like biblical inerrancy and infallibility. One author said that the evangelical view that the Bible is perfect and that each verse is an intentional message from God cannot be overemphasized. Many of the differences between evangelicalism and other forms of Western Christianity derive from the extraordinary status given to the Bible by evangelicals. Virtually all of the dark side of evangelicalism stems from this one aspect of their faith. My mom was raised in a very conservative Free Methodist home, and she taught us many of those same things, even though we were raised Baptist. And she was adamant that pretend this is a Bible, nothing goes on top of the Bible. Not another book, not a piece of paper, not the newspaper, not a pen, not a pencil. Nothing goes on top of the Bible. We suffered from bibliolatry. Now, this taking the Bible literally, this context-free literalism binds evangelicals to a series of ancient concepts ranging from the inferiority of women, patriarchy, misogyny, white supremacy, racism and slavery, and Christian nationalism, because those things are in the Bible. It also includes the notion of absolutes, core, unchangeable biblical truths and moral standards derived from God's nature as omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, sovereign, and the Bible, which, as we mentioned before, is divinely inspired. Now, an emphasis on an unchanging God and an inerrant text can be misapplied to a lot of other religious interpretations, opinions, and traditions that also must never change. This includes political and economic values. To their minds, conservative political opinions and capitalistic economic values are biblical. To them, family values and straight heterosexual marriage are biblical values. Now, here's where it gets weird. They ignore that most of the Bible marriages are one man with a whole bunch of women. And that family values include your siblings selling you into slavery and dads having sex with their daughters. Okay. This emphasis on the Bible as the only necessary source of knowledge for and application to all arenas of life necessarily leads to and means a denigration of rationality, science, intellectualism, and education. In our church, there were 2 professors. Out of some 4,500 professors that were in the Moscow-Pullman area, 2 attended our church. 1, a retired professor from the U of I, and myself. One Wednesday night, we had a Wednesday evening prayer service, and this young college student comes to the microphone. They were at the microphone praying so everyone can hear them. And she was cursing the professors at the University of Idaho and WSU and asking God to judge them and punish them for teaching ungodly things. I was kind of in the back. My friend Dr. Carlson was sitting over there, and I kind of looked at him and he just rolled his eyes. Because, she's cursing my friends, the people I spend all my waking days with. She's cursing me. And I got so much flack from a lot of conservative people in our church for being a state employee. And worse, being a state employee in education. Oh, God. I won't use the words he said to me. Okay. Rousas John Rushdoony. This was somebody that we had his books and we read him. He was an arch-conservative Presbyterian minister and outspoken advocate of homeschooling, asserted that all non-Christian knowledge is sinful, invalid nonsense, and that the only valid knowledge that non-Christians possess is stolen from Christians. Okay. What does it mean for them to update a belief? Questioning or updating a belief can feel like doubting God rather than maturing with God. It can mean losing the clarity of a simple good-evil binary framework and being forced to accept nuance. It can mean losing the comfort and security of believing my group is right. I'm on the right track. We've found the truth and everyone else in the world is wrong. And questioning or updating a belief can feel like a profound loss of certainty. Churches and leaders sometimes reward certainty and conformity and loyalty more than curiosity, confession, or learning. So staying the same socially is safe, and changing can be relationally costly. Leaders often teach that questioning or disagreement with them equals rebellion. And of course, you all know that the sin of rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, which deserves capital punishment according to the literal reading of the Old Testament. Rebellion was the worst sin, except for homosexuality. Many on the religious right are taught a defensive posture towards society and especially popular culture, and any change that looks too close to a broader culture is dismissed as compromise rather than discerned on its own merits. This leads to an insular isolation from culture and the creation of an alternative Christian media bubble. Christian books, Christian music, Christian TV, Christian movies, Christian education, Christian movie awards, Christian music awards. Its own little bubble. And I'm here to tell you that most of what happens in that bubble is mediocre in terms of art. But it's approved because it's in the bubble. In highly politicized contexts, theological shifts can also be read as political betrayal, which further raises the cost of growth. I once got massively sideways with my pastor, senior pastor, because I told him, I challenged his assumption that not everyone in our church was a Republican.
Oh.
And it got chippy. And finally, we were talking at church. I finally left. I said, I can't do this anymore. Went home. 20 minutes later, he shows up on the doorstep saying, we got to finish this conversation. So, what does it mean to leave the right? How does it feel? I'm going to give you some of the metaphors for how I felt leaving the right. The certainty of religious belief on the right is a house of cards. It is brittle, fragile, flimsy, and they're desperately trying to shield it from the winds of time, change, and the spirit. The cards along the base are biblical inspiration, biblical inerrancy, biblical infallibility, biblical absolutes, the historicity of the biblical texts, penal substitutionary atonement, and the gospel of sin management. And you touch any one of those, the whole thing comes in. I remember listening to Obama's inaugural address in January of 2009 when he said, this is a direct quote, "What the cynics fail to understand is that the ground has shifted beneath them, that the stale political arguments that have consumed us for so long no longer apply." I felt that. I wanted so desperately to vote for him, but he was a Democrat. I voted for whoever the Republican was that year. But I identified with that phrase, the ground has shifted beneath you. So this is what leaving the right feels like. Everything that you once thought was solid and trustworthy and believable is shaken and shimmies and tilts, and you're left reeling and grasping for anything solid to hold on to because everything you once trusted and relied on is shaking. That's what it means to leave the right. Or imagine you spent your life building a sandcastle, and one day when your back is turned, the tide comes in and washes it all away. It's all gone. There isn't even a lump in the sand to show where it was. And I want you to look very closely, right there. See the W? That was my life. Washed away. Imagine you've spent your whole life with a map, a plan for how things are supposed to go, and a GPS blue dot that told you where you were and where you were going. Then suddenly it feels like you took a turn and you realize suddenly you are off the map. And the blue dot is gone. It's over there somewhere. You're not sure where you went off the map. You're not sure where or when you left the boundaries of the map, but you know for sure you're off it. And you have no idea where you are or where you're going or how you might get back even if you could. All the certainty, clarity, and security you built your life on, atomized and drifted away on the breeze. You are alone and lost, and no one is coming. It's an oh crap moment when you realize that. Lastly, imagine this scenario. You were raised in a loving nuclear family where you felt loved, secure, cared for, and then like halfway through life at 40, you find out accidentally that you were adopted. And you didn't know you were adopted. Can you imagine how the gutting that feels like? That everything you thought you knew is gone because it wasn't true. And those people lied to you, and you're the last one left on the outside. It can be very traumatic. And then what it means to rebuild. What does it mean to rebuild your life after you've left the religious right? It's like this. You're sitting in a pile of rubble that was once the edifice of your life. And you're trying to decide if you still want to live here, trying to decide if you should even bother to rebuild, how to rebuild, what to save from your old edifice and what to toss aside, and where do you even begin? I was talking to my therapist, bless her heart. I shared that with her. I said, I feel like I'm sitting in a pile of rubble and I have to rebuild. I have to rebuild. I don't know where to start. I have to rebuild. And she said, how long did it take you to build that first building? I said, 35 years. And she said, give yourself a little grace. It's going to take some time. She was a good therapist. Okay. So, what can be done? What actually helps? If you know someone leaving the right, relational safety is critical. People grow when they are loved. And when they know they will not be shamed, exiled, or fixed for asking hard questions. Recognize and support that growth is slow. Realizing that the wall can disrupt anyone's life, be patient. Offer a model of humble change. When respected Christians openly repent, revise, and keep following Jesus, it normalizes growth and change as faithfulness rather than betrayal. Assure them that they can live without answers, but not without meaning, and Jesus provides meaning. But Jesus doesn't always provide answers. And then practices of self-examination, confession, lament, listening to the marginalized, reading church history is huge. It was huge for me. Finding out they really believed that? Oh my. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. Heidi's going to tell you all the rest. in the very few minutes I have left here.
There we go. There we go. Okay, better. All right. Thank you for that reminder.
Looking at your boobs.
Don't know how we fix that.
That's what we're seeing.
We can fix it.
Yeah, it's on. It's where's the Zoom?
You just got to get the cursor over here.
Oh,
so,
over here.
Yeah, so, yeah.
There we go. Thank you. I was looking for it
Then-
on me. Do I have right
Yeah,
place?
you're
Or
screen
screen
three.
3? Okay.
Yeah.
That should do it. It looks right.
Yeah, so, and then just turn it back some.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, better. Whew. All right, so good morning. I'm going to pick up, and thanks to Phil for just some excellent remarks this morning, and for bringing us up to the point where we can perhaps begin to understand what's happening on the religious right. Now, before I go into too many of my remarks, I want to kind of set a bit of a qualification out there, or a bit of an explanation, one of my own assumptions. And that's that the religious right, I think, broadly can be framed as the evangelical movement. And within that movement is another circle. I have no idea how big or how small it is, but it fits within the religious right. And that's the Christian nationalist movement. And so that's to say that not every evangelical is a Christian national, but it's pretty sure that every Christian national is evangelical. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, so I'm going to try to share with you, let's see if I can, it's not going to want to move my slides.
So, yeah, the cursor. Well, you can, this seems to be working.
Is that working?
Yeah, so just bring the arrow over.
Bring the arrow over here.
The other direction. Go right.
All right.
There. There you go. And then just click on it. It should work.
Got to go back to the right.
Yeah.
There it is.
So just leave it there. And now just
Click
yeah.
down here. Oh,
Yeah.
here we go.
So you're
I think I'm good. Thank you for that. All right. So, I'm going to start by talking about some ways to approach conversations with the religious right. Now, a lot of my comments have broader applicability. So you can view this as a way not just to ground yourself for talking with the religious right, but perhaps for broader forms of action. Yesterday was pretty unsettling. It's hard for us to know how to respond. So I recently read an article, and it's called Sit, Pray, and Rise to Act. It was in Sojourners magazine in June 2025, and it had 8 what I felt were excellent points for orienting yourself for conversation or for action. So before I launch into the 8 points, I'm going to say that as Phil was talking, it occurred to me that most of these actions, which may sound simple, are really not. In fact, I think they fit squarely at level 4 or above of the model of spiritual development that Phil shared. So you all can let me know if you agree or disagree with that assessment after I've gone through them. And I have once again brilliantly lost the cursor. There we go. Okay, so how can we engage meaningfully? So, first of all, acknowledge that the world belongs to God. So the author of the article points out that both the religious right and what the author calls the secular left have a very strong good versus evil orientation. And that's pretty polarizing, right? You can really get stuck in that viewpoint. But the author also says that we as Christians, or what you could call the religious left, to use Phil's term, have another viewpoint that we can adopt. And that's that all life is permeated and upheld by the presence and the breath of God. We live amid limitless love, God's love, desiring to shape the essence of the world's life. So I'm going to pause here and say this isn't meant to be a rose-colored glasses view of how to respond. It's simply a different way of looking at things. Instead of getting stuck in good versus evil, consider that broader view. Okay, the broader view that says it's in God's hands, God has this, and we are partners in God's plan. Okay, so just taking a step back from polarization. Next, engage from a spiritual foundation. Gosh, let's go back. There we go. Engage with the world from a spiritual perspective. So despite what I just said about the polarizing good versus evil, I think a lot of us have felt evil forces lately, right? It's there. So this is somewhat a bit of name it and claim it, okay? We are supposed to say, or we are allowed to say, yes, there is evil in the world. I see this. We see what's happening. But at the same time, if we engage with those forces in a way that affects real social change, then we're going to do better. And that involves a real period of spiritual preparation or an inward spiritual journey. Okay, so again, pointing back to what Phil was saying, we're talking about level 4 or higher, I think, in terms of spiritual development. So the author says, and I think this is pretty tough, and again, the author of the article, your inward spiritual engagement and outward witness should be woven together seamlessly. Yeah, that's not easy. Okay, next, act on the basis of call. So when events like yesterday happen, and we just think back over the past year of things that are happened, it can be paralyzing. There are so many things that come to mind of what we could say or what we could do. And we certainly shouldn't jump out and try to do all of them. So what can we do? Again, going back to the first 2 points, remaining rooted and grounded, finding that inner spiritual space, and asking ourselves, each of us, what is really mine to do here? Think back to a couple of weeks ago when the presentation was happening with, it was when Sarah Augustine was here with us, and she was talking about what she is involved with her organization, undoing the doctrine of discovery, basically. She said that she knew that what she was engaging in was going to take more than her lifetime. And yet, anyone who heard her presentation heard real commitment and passion. That is someone who is speaking from a grounding of call. And so that's what we mean when we say, act on the basis of call. You're really going to have to, each of us is going to have to go deep within and say, what is really mine to do? Next, be committed to the long term. So, the leaders in our government today, and many of the people supporting them, and the activities that they are engaging in and the changes that they are making. This did not happen overnight, right? This happened over more than 50 years. We need to consider that and know that we are not going to be able to turn things around through words or actions overnight. This is a long-term perspective. And again, pointing back to Sarah Augustine's comments, she said the same thing. Her plan, her organization's plan, is, I believe, a 100-year plan to undo the doctrine of discovery. Yeah, with the first legislation planned for 2050, I think. Okay, so we all need to be prepared for a rather, I'm not going to say things are going to be bad for forever, but we need to be prepared for a long-term effort and be committed to that. Okay. Next of all, display resilience. Measuring, thank you. I appreciate the trigger to change that. All right, display resilience. So we can't measure our success and our confidence levels the same way we would when we're looking at our daily goals and our achievements. Looking back to the first point, that's the world belongs to God. Again, we're working in partnership with God on this. And God's goals are bigger than anything that we could dream up anytime. So the bad and the good news is more is out of our control than we would normally imagine. Okay. So we need to take things day by day. Patience. Next of all, detach from ego. So separating our ego from the results of our efforts, whether those efforts are going well or going poorly, it's both a psychological and a spiritual effort. So the author of the article suggests that committing to regular and well-curated spiritual practices that include listening and silence will offer the opportunity to face and diffuse the power of your ego. So it probably goes without saying that your ego is that voice inside of you that associates your skills, your talents, your abilities with who you are, when really you are something else altogether, right? We often hear this. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So the more we can detach ego from the results of our actions with respect to what's happening in our environment, the better we're going to be, the more effective we're going to be. Also, consider how you feel when other people are talking to you. If you think they're speaking from their own agenda or from ego, what are you going to respond to? Are you going to respond to that, or are you going to respond to somebody who you think is really coming from a different position, a more spiritual position, something that is at least unbiased? So again, it's a key to influence. If we hope to talk with and influence the Christian right, we need to try to detach as much as possible from our own ego. All right, the next point may be one of the most important, and I would have loved to have seen it at the top of the list, but I think there's a reason it's not there, and that's don't demonize your opponents. Oh, this is so hard to do, right? And I think it really relies on many of the points that come before it in the list. So to be effective in doing this, both in terms of reaching the religious rights and also not preoccupying yourself with how crazy the religious right may seem at times. I mean, really, that can distract you from your purpose. All right. You want to take some time to understand the religious right and why perhaps they think the way they do. Phil's comments this morning, I think, go a long way towards shedding light on that. And I'll share with you some additional resources in a moment. So, as Phil shared, members of the religious right have a lot at stake if they choose to go against their leadership and other members of the religious right. Words that we might design to persuade them to join us, join what we see as a nobler effort, actually put pressure on them and make them feel very uncomfortable and insecure. So we're only going to get to radical transforming change when we don't attack each other, right? Nobody ever won an argument by making the other person wrong. And we're sure not going to prevail now if we try to do that. Last, pointing to Ephesians 3:14-19, and really pointing back to the rest of the list, remaining rooted and grounded in love. I think that's just foundational for everything here. You're rooting your life in the trust that God's love is at the center of all things. And this points to language and actions of love and peace, and certainly not hate. I think we've all noticed that the words and actions of many, not everybody, but many on the religious right, especially Christian nationalists, don't seem particularly Christian. Like, for example, rejecting Christ's statements in the Sermon on the Mount as being weak. So being rooted and grounded in God's love gives us a different and a compassionate basis for talking with members of the religious right. I really wish I could stand up here and give you all a script for doing this, but I simply don't think there is one, right? It's really a matter of individual preparation and centering yourself in the best way possible. And also just knowing when in your own heart you feel it's the right thing to do to engage in conversation with someone. It's an individual choice. So let's move to talking about some resources. Because this conversation is really, it's so deep. I mean, this is, when Phil and I were first planning this, it really felt like a boiling the ocean kind of topic. And so I think the best thing to do is to share with you all some resources, and I'm not even going to share all of them with you today. Early next week, Cindy will send you all a list of resources. You can look through them, read what you like, read what is helpful. It's not meant to be an assignment. It's offered in the spirit of we hope this helps. The list includes all of the resources that Phil and I used in preparing our presentations today. And it also includes some additional resources that Steve Giles provided. And those resources will come with some links and some additional information because we won't be covering those particular elements today. Again, we hope this helps. The idea of offering these resources is that, again, in order to engage in productive dialogue, meaningful action, we have to understand what's happening. And I think, always for me, the best way is to open a book, look at an article, do something. And so we're going to share with you some of the information that we have found, and again, we hope it's helpful. But very quickly, and I do mean quickly because we're down to about 5 minutes, I'm going to share with you 2 books. They're very different books, but they're recent books, and I find them to be complementary. So the first one is Beth Macy's Paper Girl. Paper Girl was published very late last year, and it is a book about the author's hometown of Urbana, Ohio. The author decided to write the book because she discovered over visits back to her hometown that things were changing radically. The town that she remembered as being fairly balanced, we all may have different opinions, but we get along, was now butting heads regularly. Things as basic as the local high school reunion committee couldn't get together to plan the reunion because everybody kept getting into arguments, to things that were much more complicated, including just an increasing drug problem in the town, economy of the town tanking because of globalism. I mean, there were a whole range of things that were contributing. But the bottom line was that because of these various social, economic, and even religious factors, because yes, Christian nationalism is a factor in Urbana, just all of that over time was leading the townspeople to no longer be able to talk to each other. And the author just found what was happening to be striking. And so she wrote a book about it. And the book includes both results of the interviews and also some of her own personal experience. I highly recommend the book if you want to understand broadly what's happening beyond religious factors, including but beyond. This is a very good book to read. It's been nominated for the National Book Circle Award, which will be awarded in March. It's appeared on multiple best books of 2025, including Barack Obama's list of 2025 books to read. And again, I don't think I can recommend this one too highly. Next, and perhaps on a somewhat lighter vein, but not really, because it's still very serious, April Ajoy's Star-Spangled Jesus, which was published in 2024. This is a book about Christian nationalism and the religious right. The author is the daughter of a pastor, actually the daughter and a granddaughter of well-known evangelical pastors. She never names them in the book. But she talks about how over the years, especially as she enters her college and adult years, she experiences increasing cognitive dissonance with what's happening in her religious life. She shares a wonderful story. She's a journalist. She shares a wonderful story about a job she took after coming out of graduate school, where she decided she had two choices. She could either go work with a Christian broadcaster exclusively, or she could go and she could, what she called, go undercover, which was, I guess, incredibly intriguing to her because that is what she did. Going undercover doesn't mean hiding her Christianity. It means going to work for a secular journalism organization and trying to influence them over time. And what she discovered was, and she expected to run into the, I hate people who would hate her or dislike her because of her Christianity. And instead what she discovered was that she was embraced, appreciated, and valued, and she simply couldn't understand why all of these heathens were treating her as an overt Christian so nicely. So it really is fascinating, and I think reflects back somewhat on what Phil was saying about his experiences when he realized that people outside of his congregation who were Christian were not evil. So it's really, this was for me a very enjoyable read. She writes well, April Ajoy writes well, and she, in addition to sharing some of her own vignettes, she provides a brief history of Christian nationalism, which, if you really aren't into reading the academic treatises on the subject, might be interesting to you. Okay. All right, I'm going to wrap that up because we are at noontime. And I just want to thank you all for being here. This has, I know we've been through kind of an incredibly difficult period of time, and then yesterday was hard too. And so I appreciate everybody being here today for this conversation.
I just want to offer this up to you, something I'm doing. It's been a week full of grief, 2 weeks. And I just offer it to you if at home, as you process your feelings of grief, if you had a special place that you went to and lit a candle, set up some place where you can go and in those moments spend it in prayer or reflection, but take some time for yourself and then listen to the calling of God. That's where He speaks. God be with us all.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. All right. What's the next one?
Yeah, just go over and stop sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, then you can end it.